Good day, viewers of Public Access. My name is Dave McWilliams. I'm the host of today's show, and I think this show will be quite enlightening. What's going on in our world today, and no longer do we, know what's going to happen with North Korea or Iran. But we got a special guest here who's been in that area, and he's got some beautiful pictures he's going to show us and talk about them. So I want to introduce my guest, Admiral Warren Hamm. He lives in St. Albans. And Admiral, could you give us a little background, because some people moving in this area may not know you, so could you talk about your little history?
Well, I was born and brought up in St. Albans, graduated from BFA in the old days, 1946. And then I went off to the Maine Maritime Academy. And upon graduation, I entered the Navy as an ensign. And I spent 41 years on active duty. And during that time, I was very fortunate. I seemed to be at the right place at the right time, where all the action was. And I had command of four different Navy ships, 2 destroyers, a missile cruiser, and a destroyer tender. Then as a flag officer, I had the amphibious force in the Atlantic Fleet and the military sea lift command, which we had 10,000 people and 163 ships. Well, one of my first job as a flag officer was most unique in that I was assigned to Korea. And I wonder what in the world is a naval officer going to Korea for? But one of my jobs there was a senior member of the Military Armistice Commission, which maintained communication with the North Koreans. And that's certainly very particular today. As I said, had a most fortunate career. And if I had to do over again, I'd do everything the very same. I wouldn't change one single thing tomorrow. And
you've been a lifelong resident of this area.
Well, except for the 41 years in the Navy.
Yeah, those years, but you still had residency here in Vermont.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Navy was good to me, and I was fortunate. I made 2 stars. And so after contemplating what I'm going to do when I retire, I decided to give back to the community and the state and the country what it gave to me. And so I've been up to my neck and volunteer in all kinds of things from the Navy level, state, Merchant Marine Academy, and here.
So that's what keeps you young.
Oh, yes.
Because if you, I can't imagine you slowing down. If you slow down, that means you're, like me, if I slow down, I wouldn't be here very much longer.
That's right. You'd probably collapse.
Yeah. So, you've done a lot of volunteer for the museum and different clubs and stuff like that, and I commend you for doing it.
Well, we've got different projects around. I mean, all you have to do, instead of sitting there and wring your hands, look at something, see what has to be done, and go and do it.
Yeah. And of course, you started the valet service up at the hospital.
Just recently, yes.
Yeah.
But here again, I was up there one day by the entrance, and I saw people basically staggering up the hill, or they get out of a car, one person would have an oxygen bottle, another a walker, and to try to get into the hospital. Once you get in, you're all set, but getting there. So I thought, well, why can't we set something up to have transportation to help these people and or park their vehicles? So talked to the veterans organizations, and we got going what's going today.
I was up there yesterday, and I had to go to Doctor's Commons, and I saw the little, it's a 4-seater, isn't it?
It's actually, it's an elongated golf cart.
Yeah.
Holds 6 people, has air conditioning and heat, and it's working out quite well. We got to do a little bit more for prepare for winter, but
yeah. Well, I think I've seen people use it. So.
Oh yes, yes. To see their faces when they see will help you is worth the whole thing.
Yeah, and of course the hospital's still under construction, but it's probably going to be finished most of the outside work this fall.
Yeah, the 25th is the big grand opening of the new building over there.
Yeah.
But it's also good for the veterans because it gets them out, meeting people.
That's right.
And then the people say, geez, these guys are already served and they're still serving.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. The question is in reference to North Korea, how long were you in that area, and did you see any hostile things going on when you were there? And then we can come up to today and what's going on over there now?
Well, I was where all the action was. In accordance with the United Nations, I, an American, was the only one that could talk to the North Koreans. I represented all the South Koreans, and I represented the United Nations. So it was quite an awe-inspiring job for a guy that came from St. Albans, Vermont.
You must have had a translator, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But I want quickly, as a matter of history, the Korean War ended in '53. And regardless of what anybody says, we beat them. However, it was not a peace treaty or anything like that. It was an armistice. And as everybody knows, an armistice is a temporary cessation of hostilities. So the thing has never been solved since '53. Now I got to stress, North Korea's only goal then, now, is to take over South Korea on their terms. North Korea is not interested in world domination or promoting North Korean philosophy to the world. They want to take over South Korea on their terms.
Why would they want to do that?
Well, because it was divided. At the end of World War II, they divided it at the 38th parallel. And the people, there were Koreans, and they're still Korean. And you just can't edict, suddenly you've got two countries. I guess you could say they tried that in the Civil War, and that didn't work.
Yeah.
Here. So that has been their goal in everything they do. When you're in South Korea, you'd go up to the DMZ. Of course, everybody couldn't go within the DMZ, but the South Koreans could get up there, and they'd stand for hours just looking north at North Korea, just looking. And we say, well, that's bizarre. Well, maybe it is, but that's what they did, and that's the strong ties. And when I was there, that was in the beginning at the end of the 70s. Even the North Korean and the South Korean languages had begun to change because they were so isolated. So my people couldn't understand some of the words the North Koreans were saying. So going back, there's never been a peace treaty. It's still an armistice. Now, I blame the United Nations for the mess we're in today. Because ever since 1953, they've continually kicked the can down the road, have not said, we're going to solve this problem. Now, to me, if I was in overall charge of the whole thing, the United Nations, I'd say, all right, North Korea, you sit down, South Korea, you sit down, United Nations, we're going to solve it. We're tired kicking the can down the road. I'm concerned today that we may be beyond the point of solving the problem peaceably. You can only do that so often.
Yeah.
My experience with the South Koreans, with the North Koreans, and I think it's pretty damn accurate, nobody else has had that experience. The only time they understand something is if you say bang, 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 and then carry it out. If you don't carry out what you say, they say they aren't serious, and they'll continue headed towards their goals.
Yeah.
Now, I would tell the North Koreans something, and I said, if this happens again, your men are going to get killed. And of course, they didn't believe you, and so they do it, and we eliminate them. They were all excited. So you say, well, on so-and-so, I told you this, and if you did it, this is what happened. You did it, and that happened. If you do it again, it's going to happen.
So basically, you feel that the United Nations is
remiss.
Yeah.
When North Korea started shooting the missiles, we should have said to them, that's unsat, we don't accept it. If you shoot another one, we're going to eliminate it. And of course, as I said, they're going to do it because they think you're joking.
Yeah.
They shoot it, we eliminate it, and we say, okay, you did it, that's what happens. If you do it again, the base is going to go. Believe me, when they understand and realize that what we say, we carry out, they will stop this business.
Yeah, because right now we're just teasing them.
It's one-upmanship.
Yeah.
And that bothers me a little bit about Trump. He says these things, but nothing is happening.
Yeah.
And they're just going to continue. Oh, that means they won't do anything.
Yeah. Could you talk about some of these pictures? They're quite remarkable, you know, and that way the viewers can see some of the
These
pictures.
shots were certainly unofficial. They were given to me when I left Korea. And on the organization, you have North Korea, South Korea. Now, representing South Korea was the United Nations. And at the armistice, the United Nations said, the United States, you were the predominant force in our recent hostilities. You will administer the provisions of the armistice. That is how an American became senior member of the Armistice Commission. Prior to my arrival, it rotated between the two stars, Army, U.S., Army, Air Force, and Navy. And my boss, the 4-star, he liked me, and he said, I want you to stay there. And I enjoyed it. It was a good job. And so I said, fine. That's how I stayed longer than anybody previous to me. So you had the organization. Also with the North Koreans were the Chinese. This is the Chinese general. At that time, generals and privates all wore the same uniform. Didn't know who it was. But this guy would sit like this for hours. He wouldn't blink an eye or anything. Never knew he was dead or not. But he still sat there, and he got up and left. And on the south was, as I said, South Korea and the United Nations. And I represented the United Nations. Now, as a go-between the North and the South, they had what was called the Neutral Nations Commission. That's these generals. They had a Pole and a Czech for the North, and a Swede and a Czech, Poland, and anyway. And they sort of oversaw the armistice. If I had something like the North Koreans were pointing their weapons at my people and would go poof, poof, like that, and you don't do that in an environment like this. And so I told these guys to tell the North Koreans that my orders were that the next time they did that, my people were going to shoot. And that stopped right away. So they were good. It's sort of a interesting thing. They didn't do too much, but they were there as a backup. And this is the Chinese. And this, he didn't normally look like this, but my people took that picture when he didn't know it. And he was a 2-star North Korean, my counterpart. He is the guy that I had to talk to. And if I had something I wanted to say to the North Koreans, I'd say it. It'd be in English. And then one of my people would get up and give it in Korean. He'd sit down, and another one of my people would get up and give it in Chinese. So I wouldn't get an answer back to my question until it'd been translated twice, and he'd gotten an answer. And that's the way when he talked to me, he would talk, and one of his people would get up and give it in English, and then in Chinese. It's quite a time-consuming operation. And anybody who excused themselves for calls of nature, you'd lose faith. So I didn't eat or drink anything for 24 hours in advance. And still I had the urge. Haven't figured that out yet. This was the Czech. And here they were again. Now these are the North Koreans, just like you see the pictures on TVs. And this is actually Panmunjom. This is the building here where we had the meetings. This was the North Korean headquarters. It basically was a facade. It was a small building in behind, but here was this great big thing. It always impressed you that for the meetings, when the North Koreans drove up, they drove up in red Mercedes Benzes. And we walked. But when we had a meeting, this was inside the meeting room. This was my side. This is me in whites, then in blues. And these were other members that sat at the table with me. South Korean, and this particular guy was the Turk. In between here we had Canadians and so forth and so on. And we had videos. And these were the North Korean, and the Chinese was over to his right. And outside the building were all the reporters from all over the world. They hung around and they made their reports. And so the North Koreans never believed anything. So one time they infiltrated the South. They had, this is not very impressive, but this was an agent boat, 45 knots. It had weapons on it, and they'd whip down across the border and drop off agents in South Korea. And this time we caught them, and the South Korean Navy sunk it. And I was also the operational commander of the Korean Navy, and they had a good salvage capability. So I told them, I said, I want you to salvage that thing and bring it up. I don't want anybody to know about it. And I said, when you get it up, you put it on a trailer and cover it over, and then bring it up to Panmunjom. So this is like a Hollywood production. So we had the meeting, and I accused them of what they did, and they of course shook their head, no such thing. So, and I said, to show you and the world that we were speaking the truth, bring on the agent boat. And the U.S. Army roared in with this big thing stopped. And these guys looked at it and they said, there's nothing there. And you and I would say, that's crazy, because something is there. But they have been so programmed that what they're told, they truly believe.
Even today.
Yes. You got to understand that North Korean children, and I can't say exactly today, but when I was there, up until that time, when they were young babies, the state would take them and brainwash them. And then the parents have to get permission to come and see them on a weekend. And you say, that's crazy. Well, it may be crazy, but that's the kind of people we are dealing with.
The ones that we're dealing with today are brainwashed too.
Oh, yes.
Now, I understand that their armies and their families are taken care of well, but the other people, the regular citizens, are starving to death?
Yes, because all their money, all the assets go to the armed forces. The Navy and the aircraft, they are all underground. The airstrips, as I said, are underground. The mountain opens up in the front, and the aircraft can take off full throttle right out to the runway and take off. The ships, they have a pretty good submarine force. They are all underground. But once again, I hasten to say they aren't Goliath. They got problems. They got leadership problems.
Yeah.
You eliminate the leaders, the non-commissioned officers, the petty officers, and they'd have a big triumph.
Now, if you eliminate the guy over there, the president there,
Kim Il-sung,
Kim Il-sung, is there, you know, has he got a relative waiting in the background to take his place, or you know?
I haven't heard who. But to answer your question, yes, there's somebody there.
Yeah.
But to be perfectly blunt, there's no way that you're going to change the masses' thinking by turning a switch. They aren't waiting, breathless for democracy. This is their way of life. They don't know any better.
Yeah.
So in order to make a change, you're going to have to eliminate the whole top echelon. That means Kim Il-sung and his hench people. People say, that's terrible. Well, do you want to solve the problem or don't you?
Where do they get all their money that, for all the rockets? They send up, how many missiles?
Iran, China, Russia help them. You got to be careful what China and Russia says, because what they say and what they do are probably different things.
Yep.
There's all kinds of ways of funneling assets to the North Koreans.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, North Korea's goal is to take over South Korea on their terms, not a democratic way or anything like that. Their terms.
Do you think the United States has done all they've done is try to negotiate it, and sooner or later it's not going to work anymore?
When I was there, it was a military arms commission, and so we had complete reign. But even so, it was very difficult. I would go to the United Nations, which was a boss, my boss, one of my bosses, and recommend something or do something, and they very rarely even answered. My chain of command was the 4-star out there, the Army. His boss was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, whose boss was the president. And between me and the president was 2 people. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But even so, we could not get the United Nations to take a deep breath and say, hey, we've put up with this stuff long enough.
Do you think we're wasting our money staying in with the United Nations?
No, because that's the only way we have to talk to people. It's certainly better than nothing.
Yeah.
Once in a while they come through. But when the premier of when the Secretary General of the United Nations, before this guy, was South Korean, I thought, oh, what a fantastic opportunity to solve this problem. But no, he made no effort. And South Korea has an excellent armed forces. It's patterned after our Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. But we have become their security blanket, and psychologically, if we pulled out, it would not be good. It would be like a house of cards.
Do you think that, I know that Trump has put hands down on China and says, look, if you keep on feeding them money and supplies, that we're going to cut off all our products coming from your country. Do you think that helps at all?
I don't know. I don't know if he'd do it. I don't know if they're convinced he would. I mean, he's made these statements about shooting the missiles. My God, North Korea has shot 2 missiles across Japan. If North Korea shot 2 missiles across the United States, I would hope we'd become quite excited and do something.
Yeah.
My opinion, he should have said, the next missile you launch is going to get shot down.
Yeah. When you had a picture up here, this one up here, what were these?
All right. Those are the famous tunnels.
Tunnels under North Korea and South Korea?
Yeah. The northern part of Korea is all solid rock, granite type of rock. Very, very difficult to mine. Well, up around the DMZ, they had many metal telegraph electrical poles. And they're leaning up there one time, and they heard grinding noises, pounding. And it was obvious people were excavating down within the ground. Now, for the doubters, everybody knows what sonar is. You have an electrical beam in water, goes out, it bounces on the submarine, comes back. Well, granite is a big conductor of noise. So you can hear noise being transmitted, and then the metal poles pick it up. So they could determine by sound, acoustics, about where the sound was coming from. So they got the Colorado mine experts in and said, this is where you should drill. The idea was to drill down to where the tunnel was and then drill a counter tunnel down into there. And this is what the tunnel looked like and the counter tunnel. And the problem was that the tunnels, they'd be down 35, 40, no, more than that, feet, close to 100 feet down in there. By the time the drill bit got down there, the solid rock deflected it. So it could be 35 feet away from where you wanted it to go. And so it would be just by chance that you would drill into one of the North Korean tunnels, because it was pressurized. When you did, there's a shot of water, etc., would come out.
Yeah.
So you would know where the tunnel was, and once in a while you could drill. Of course, I mean, you could argue that. But what the general I wanted to do was to, when we came across that and we drilled in, pump an implosion gas, which would implode, collapse the whole thing and kill everybody. I mean, the North Koreans couldn't complain because what they were doing was illegal.
That's right.
But the State Department got excited, got into it and got all excited and precluded us doing it. But see, it emphasizes the point, you know, this is deadly stuff. If people got to know you mean business, you got to show that you mean business. And it's going to cost lives. Elsewise, don't fool around with it.
That's right. You know, either, you know, like you said, if they shoot up another missile and it comes towards the United States is either going to have to, I don't want to say it, got to get off the pot.
That's right.
Do something about it.
But you got the people, oh, we don't want to do anything. Hell, whatever you expend now is going to be small to what you expend in the future.
Yeah. Because I don't think those North Koreans are afraid to die.
Of course not. Yeah. That's a culture.
Yeah.
I mean, they can, you tell them to charge the hill, hell, they'll continue to charge until you say stop or they overrun the place.
Yeah. But it's sad that they, you know, what they do to the children, you know, that the children should learn a little bit of history about, you know, their country, but also about the world, so that the way they would have a better.
They don't know anything about the world. All they learn is North Korea. And,
yeah.
Kim Il-sung, the current leader, his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, and he was the guy that I dealt with.
Yeah.
And he was not born. He came out of the mountain. That's how he came into the world.
Yeah.
And this is what they believe.
Now, earlier you talked about Iran, you know, and you made some comments. You know, is Iran help building some of their rockets or supplying them with?
It appears so. I don't know that much about it, but yes. I mean, it's their goal. I mean, it's to their advantage. It causes unrest in the rest of the world.
Yeah. Everybody.
The North Korea has got to be stopped now. You can't. And people say, well, if you eliminate that missile base, they're going to attack Seoul. Well, if you tell the North Koreans, you launch another missile, we're taking that out. But just so you understand, if you think you're going to attack Seoul, we're going to obliterate Seoul. I mean, we're going to obliterate North Korea.
Yeah.
And if they believe you, that will end it.
Yeah.
But if we keep procrastinating, why should they believe us?
Yeah.
They are headed to their goal. They do not like the United States, because keep in mind, by the United States joining the United Nations, yes, the many other countries helped significantly, but we were the primary reason North Korea didn't succeed in coming over the border. So they hate us with truly a passion.
Do you believe in giving all these countries money to be our friends?
No, we're very selective.
That's right. Yeah, because, you know, didn't Iran get money from the United States?
Oh, yes, yeah, all that cash.
Yeah. Was that the tractor-trailer truck, or was that,
Yeah.
that came up missing full of money?
Yeah.
And it's sad that we have to do that just to buy friendship or to buy peace.
Yeah. But the serious thing is the situation in Korea today. I don't really know what it is right this instant. We don't hear anything on the news. Obviously, somebody's got to be doing something. What are they doing?
Yeah.
But as long as you procrastinate, it's going to get worse and worse.
What do you think about the B-52 bombers going across, you know, South Korea and a little bit into...
Oh, good. That's fine. That's good. But that's another thing. Since the end of the Korean War, we've had exercises with South Korea every single year. I ran a bunch of them for the Navy and Marine Corps. And everything is geared to eliminating North Korea. And for the North Koreans to be all excited about it, hell, this has been going on since 1954. So there's nothing to be excited about.
Yeah.
And yes, the more of that, but the North Koreans got to understand that we aren't joking, that if they do something.
Are we prepared to go to war with North Korea?
Yes, yeah. I mean, well, we got 22,000 Army there, some Air Force. We, the U.S., have plans for every single contingency that you can think of. People, eyes open up. Or we even have plans for against Canada. I mean, that's bizarre,
yeah.
But we have plans. You're really remiss if you're in charge of something and you don't have plans in the background for anything.
Yeah.
All a plan is to get the show started. Because as soon as you implement it, things are going to change.
Do we supply enough money for all our navies and our armed forces to have the proper equipment and ships and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. That goes into our Navy a little bit.
Yeah.
I am the school, and a lot of people against this, but I think most of our money ought to be developing the weapons and the ships we have today, instead of so much for the future weapons development. That's important, but we got to be able to fight with what we have today.
Yeah.
And what we have today is excellent.
Well, yeah, being in your position that you were, I know that you know that answer. That's why I asked you. That are we prepared to go to war?
I mean, I had the amphibious force in the Atlantic, all the amphibious force in the Marines in the Atlantic, and it was our job to have a plan to go into any country or help any country in this whole eastern part of the world, Mediterranean, Arctic, and so on and so on. And so you lived with those things, and you made sure that you had enough. Well, some of our plans are pretty extensive, and you would depend upon some of the forces from the Pacific Fleet, and vice versa.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the long run, do you feel that in North Korea is getting prepared for a war against the United States?
North Korea has always been prepared for war at some level. I mean, you see on TV these masses of North Koreans goose-stepping and all kinds of this crap. I mean, that doesn't win a war.
No.
What that does is intimidate people. My God, look at this thing. I mean, how good can they fire their weapons or run their ships?
Yeah.
Sure, they're competent because they've been trained by the Soviets and the Koreans, the Chinese, but they lack the in-depth leadership. I've always contended that you eliminate their leaders and they'll be rudderless.
Yep.
So that's the key. But the leaders have been so ingrained, there'll be no such thing as maximum sacrifice. They'd do anything.
Yeah. I know, we've had a couple shipwrecks with some of our ships. Could you also talk about that?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. As I mentioned previously, I had command of 6 different Navy ships, destroyer escort, missile destroyer, missile cruiser, and a destroyer tender. So I know what I'm talking about. For collisions to happen at sea, with the equipment and the training we have, is just about impossible. Now we all know that nothing is impossible, as we saw with those collisions of the 2 ships. And I'll make a flat statement right here. There is absolutely no excuse for either one of those ships being in a collision. On a normal underway watch, we have so many people involved in keeping track of what the hell's going on around you, and unidentified contacts popping up on the radar screen, both checking with radar, electronic countermeasures, and eyeballs, binoculars.
Yeah.
That those things are impossible.
I
was there, I know.
Yeah.
You worry about things like that. You're always checking.
They don't say that in the paper, though.
Well, they don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've been sea over a ship, a destroyer, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's incompetence on those two ships. But what is even more of concern is, I think, probably in large measure the cause of those two collisions was the overdependence upon electronic devices. That people somehow thought, well, I'll be told that this is going to be a collision course, things like that. They just weren't paying to what they were supposed to be paying attention to. There's a philosophy in the modern Navy, well, the captain should be down in Combat Information Center. That's where all the electronics gear is. Instead of on the bridge. Up on the bridge, you can see what's taking place. But my philosophy is you be on the bridge when it's appropriate, down in CIC when it's appropriate. When you got ships coming as close as those two ships were projected to be, you should be up on the bridge. Well, they weren't even on the bridge, they were in their sea cabin. So I just wanted to tell people that that certainly isn't standard operating procedures in the Navy. We have a problem. We're going to have to go back and check all those basics.
Yeah.
And go back to the basics. I mean, the people that taught me were World War II vets. Had a lot of practical experience, and didn't depend so much on electronics. Electronics are important, but you can't weigh your whole life on it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So do you think that the United States should stop bullying around, and if they send up another missile, take out that missile silo?
You ask me a question, I'll give you a quick answer. Yes.
Okay. I agree, because we can't be bullied all the time by this country that doesn't care about us.
But I hasten to say that the can's been kicked down too long, and we could be at a point where it's not going to be feasible. I mean, the North Koreans, they're going to go out on a limb, they're going to say some things, and they may do some things that they wouldn't otherwise do unless they got in the corner. So, I mean, nobody's doing anybody a favor by procrastinating.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. I think if there are people that were outside their armed forces over there knew what was going on, they'd be quite upset. Of course, you can't do anything because you'll end up getting shot over there.
Well, sitting there at the table, I mentioned this before, you could see and you could feel the hate. Now somebody says, oh, you're being dramatic. Well, I'm not being dramatic. When you witness that, there's no doubt in your mind.
Yeah.
And that was pure, unadulterated hate.
So some of your officers put all this together and
they did that as a joke to give me. Yeah. I mean, here's the colonel on the other side. I know what he's doing here. That guy there is picking his nose. They just wanted to show some of the human aspects that the North Koreans would really be upset if they saw. Yeah, these pictures show actually the human element. It's not all for the general press or things like this. But this was my right hand, an U.S. Army Colonel, Ken Klapis. He's a really good guy. We thought just alike. But this particular incident here was, we, the U.S. Army, had a helicopter that strayed over the DMZ. The DMZ, demilitarized zone, fair game. As 2 clicks north, 2 clicks south, of the 30th parallel. Anybody in there was fair game. You didn't stray over there because everybody knew the rules.
Yeah.
But this Army helicopter pilot, he had 3 guys in, and they strayed over the DMZ and they got shot down. And all of them were, 2 of them were killed. And we had to have a meeting and negotiate to get the bodies back. The North Koreans brought the bodies back in garbage bags. That really infuriated me. And that's their value on life.
Yeah. What's this picture? This one right here.
Now,
looks like prisoners.
The South Koreans would capture some of the North Koreans, as I told you, were infiltrated over in their agent boats.
Yeah.
Or sometimes fishing boats would stray over, and they capture them. And they wouldn't give them back to us, the United Nations, until they gave them tours of Seoul. They bought them stereos, watches, and all those kind of things. Well, this wasn't good. And and the North Koreans did not like it. We'd have a meeting, and we'd turn the North Korean, the captured guys, over to their troops. And you'd hear the troops say, "You will take off your clothes. If you do not, you're dead." So this is them telling the North Koreans to take off their clothes. And this is them running up to their headquarters, waving their arms. They'd be telling the people how they were beaten down to the south. And so from then on, every time we captured some of them, I'd have the corpsman go through, strip them down, take pictures of the bodies to show that there are no welts or things like that.
Yeah.
And I was joking with my boss one time, and I said, you know what we ought to do is the next group we capture, we should get their skivvies, and on the back of them say, "Kim Il-sung sucks." Yeah, we thought that really caused a stir.
Yeah, it would. You know.
State Department would go out of their minds.
Yeah. So, in the long run, do you hope negotiations work, or if it doesn't work, then stop pussyfooting around and?
To be perfectly honest, with my experience and watching subsequently that, I don't see how, with the current regime, you can get the problem solved unless you eliminate the whole top echelon.
But with Iran, Russia, and the Chinese supplying supplies, because all those missiles they've sent up, they've got to get those parts from somewhere.
If I was over there now, of course I don't know all the details. You got to be very careful when you comment.
That's right.
But from what I would know, in my experience, I would tell the Chinese, the Soviets, the Russians, and Iran, we're fed up with this. We can't accept this. We are going to tell them, North Korea, that if they do it again, we're going to eliminate that base.
Straightforward.
See what they say. So they know what's going to happen.
That's right.
And tell them, I don't expect any surprises from you.
Yeah, I think you're probably 100% right, because unless you say, do it again, that base right there is gone.
Oh, and then also there's an important caveat, because the press is talking about thousands of South Korean casualties in Seoul.
Yeah.
But you tell them, oh, by the way, if you think you're going to unleash your artillery, your country's gone.
Yeah. Off the cuff, as far as nuclear weapons, do most of our ships have that capability?
A number of them have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have the nuclear missiles and the nuclear depth charges, or nuclear torpedoes.
Yeah. I never knew they had torpedoes. Yeah. Huh. Well, it's been very interesting. I hope that a lot of people, can get a better understanding, why the United States has to step up to the plate, stop fooling around with these people, and you know, if you do something again, we're going to take out that missile silo. You do it again, we'll take out the whole base. And you know, because you know, we got too many people over in on all our ships over there. So.
Well, we got 21,000 Army troops there, and if the North tries something, I mean, they're going to get involved.
Yeah.
But if we had to go into North Korea, it would be an extremely tough and nasty fight.
Yeah.
Because as I say, they're all underground.
Yeah.
And every one of them will fight.
So those caves are still there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They, the first tunnel that we intercepted just before I got there, the North Koreans booby-trapped it. And we went down, and a Marine major was killed. So you got to be careful of that.
Yeah. 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 Well, as it progresses, I might want to have you back on, you know, to get your points, you know, in reference to what's going on.
Well, something's got to happen pretty soon.
Yeah, because you know, the United States has been playing games with this guy, you know, and you got to do something. Yeah. So thank you very much, Admiral. I'm glad that you came on, and I want to have you on in the future. Any subject you want to take on, you know, I'd love to have you, because public access is all about talking about what's going on in our world and getting interviews from different people about, you know, their life, and you know, you know, you have quite a lot to offer.
Well, this has been that was a very unique experience.
Yeah, you know, it's for 41 years there, I guess it was. You know, and you know, I think that, you know, people have a better understanding now. And if you got any questions, don't be afraid to call our studio, 527-6474, and we'll make sure Admiral Hamm gets the question. So if you want to leave your telephone number, we'll make sure that you know, he'll either email you or talk to you over phone. So with this remark, I hope the viewers have a better understanding of North Korea and the United States and what's going on and what we're going to have to do. So in closing, thank you and have a nice day.